What's going on? Welcome to the episode. Today we're going to be talking about discipline because I often hear folks say things like, I'm not disciplined, I have no discipline, I need to be more disciplined. But then past that, it's sort of like this fleeting thing that people often tend to think they're either born with or they're not. So it's almost like we view it as 100% genetically determined. And fortunately, that is not the case. You can build it, and I'm speaking from personal experience. I would consider myself to be very disciplined today, but it hasn't always been that way. So we're going to make this discipline concept really concrete, really clear, and actionable so you know exactly what to do in order to build it into your life if it's something that you're interested in cultivating. So first of all, what is discipline or self-discipline? It's basically just a different word for consistency, right? Because when we say, oh, she is so disciplined, we're referring to essentially showing up over and over. So for example, she's so disciplined with her diet. That just means she consistently eats well. So the next question becomes, how do we establish consistency? Because ultimately we're after discipline, and now we know that consistency is baked into the cake. The number one requirement for consistency, or to be consistent, is commitment. You show up to work day after day for years on end because you are committed to your job. You show up as a parent or a brother or a sister or a coach day after day for years on end because you've chosen to be committed to said things. So the next question becomes, how do you commit? As you can see, we're peeling back the layers on this often undefined thing that we call discipline. So if you picture it like discipline is at the top, directly underneath that is consistency, below consistency is commitment, and what's at the root of commitment? It's your word. It's doing what you say that you're going to do. Now, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know that I like to break things down into really clear concepts because there's this tendency to make things more complicated than they are, simply as an avoidance tactic. For example, if discipline is this far off, ambiguous term, it's sort of always out of reach, right? So by breaking it down into really clear and defined parts or aspects, we can take the ambiguity out of the equation, which leaves us with tangible action steps to get what we want. So now, how do you do what you say that you're going to do? The requirement to be your word is to be absolutely ruthless with it, in my opinion. If you know that you're not going to do something, don't say that you're going to do it. And if you do say that you're going to do it, fucking do it. And I know you might be thinking, well, no shit, Marcus. It's not that easy though. Again, the tendency or pull to make things complex and or keep things ambiguous and unclear is really strong because being ruthless around your word takes a lot of effort and awareness in real life. For example, we've all been in a situation where someone invites you to something and you know immediately that you don't want to go or that you're not going to go. Instead of saying no in a polite way, we're like, oh, okay, so where is it? What time does it start? Who's all going to be there? Even though we already know that we simply don't want to partake. And there is nothing wrong with that. Now, I'm going to give you a personal example of this that just happened the other day. I was hanging out with a buddy of mine at the beach on Saturday, and he asked me if I wanted to hit the gym the following morning. And I politely declined because Sundays are sort of my day to just go with the flow, and especially this time of year because I love watching the NFL, and sometimes I just don't want to schedule anything. And after I said no to the gym, he asked me if I wanted to go for brunch after his gym session. And I politely declined again, and I explained to him exactly what I just mentioned. I said, I'm just going to go with the flow tomorrow and not plan a thing. I'm going to watch some football, maybe make some phone calls to friends and family, and just chill. And he said, oh, okay, all right, with a bit of a funny look on his face, and he might have been thinking, Why doesn't my friend want to hang out with me? And it had nothing to do with him personally. I just did not want to commit to anything because I wanted to give myself the time and space to flow with the day. Now, I could have gone with an alternative route, right? I could have said yes, knowing full well that I'm just going to send this friend a text later on saying that I'm actually not going to make it, which always feels kind of phony because you think to yourself, I knew I wasn't going to go and I didn't have the courage to be clear and honest in the moment, so there's a cost to that. Another option would be to say yes and go, even though it wasn't truly what I wanted to do on a fundamental level, which often leads to resentment for that individual, and it's not their fault if I don't communicate clearly. So resenting them isn't fair. I can't expect them to read my mind, and the truth is, I chose to say yes, which can come along with this heavy or burdensome feeling on the back end in a circumstance like this, just because I know that I compromised myself. Or I can just tell the truth, and if someone disapproves, so be it. I cannot control that, and I'd rather stay true to myself than compromise what I want and need. And sometimes doing this leads to like 5 seconds of potential awkwardness when you ultimately say no in a kind way, but that's just part of being a clear communicator. So underneath being your word is communication, voicing what you want and need in a clear and concise way, because we are not mind readers, and that's why we have language to begin with. So building discipline is actually super simple. But that doesn't mean that it's easy, because those are not synonymous terms. So let's unpack this further. How can we make something that's difficult less difficult? Let's use nutrition as an example. If your goal is to lose fat, the number one recommendation that I provide my coaching clients with is to clean house, meaning get all of the foods that aren't congruent with our goal, which is fat loss, out of the home, because the process is hard enough as it is. So why in the world would we make it harder? So step number one is to get all of the tempting calorie-dense treats out of the house and replace them with single and minimal ingredient whole foods that we know for a fact are going to make achieving our goal easier. Now, if you choose not to clean house, so in other words, you choose to keep those calorie-dense treats at arm's reach, even though you know that by doing so, you're making achieving your goal more difficult, you probably want to circle back around and question your commitment, because it's sort of like being in a monogamous relationship and hanging out at strip clubs on a daily basis. Like, you're not doing yourself any favors. And due to our evolutionary wiring, which is not monogamous, we actually choose monogamy for a whole host of reasons. So again, if you're putting yourself in situations on a regular basis where it's more difficult to be monogamous, you probably want to question your underlying commitment to such a setup. The same goes for nutrition, because we are opportunistic eaters and we're actually wired to want to consume as many calories as possible while expending the least amount of energy to obtain those calories. The formal term for this is optimal foraging theory or optimal foraging strategy, and all animals are set up this way. It's simply an evolutionary driven survival mechanism due to the food scarce environment in which we evolved. You can also think about keeping funky foods around like booby traps all over your house. If your goal is to get caught in a booby trap and trip and fall on your face, great, the more traps the better. But if you'd rather not bail and break your front teeth, then again, why make something that's already hard harder? Also, contrary to popular belief, ideally, discipline isn't even exercised much at home, because if you're relying on discipline in your home, you've sort of already lost, right? You're playing from behind. Discipline can be used at the grocery store, because that's where you're purchasing your food, and your home you want to be technically a safe space. You can think about it like home court advantage. You cannot control what other folks keep in their homes when you go for a visit, but you have 100% control over what you buy and how you set up your food environment. So keeping hyper-palatable foods around that make achieving your goal more difficult is like filling your home stadium with fans from the opposing team. If a sports franchise actually did that, you would have to seriously question whether they truly wanted to win or not. Same deal with nutrition. Your actions and how you set yourself up for success or not are a reflection of what you're truly committed to. Folks talk about self-sabotage all the time and they wonder why they do it. And it's a great question because it's so common, right? The answer is there's a clear disconnection between what someone says that they want and what they actually want. For example, if you leave a box of a dozen cookies on the counter and you're eating 3 of them a day because you find them super tasty and tempting, yet you tell yourself that your goal is fat loss, but the cookies themselves are one of the primary things that are keeping you from achieving what you say that you want. So in other words, you know that you're having a really hard time skipping the cookies that are staring you in the face every day, but you continue to buy them. This is filling your stadium with away fans, or self-sabotage in other terms. Your word and your actions aren't lining up. And by the way, there isn't anything inherently wrong with this, other than the fact that you're not being your word, because if you were just honest with yourself and you were like, cookies are more of a priority than fat loss, I love them and enjoy them, and I want to have them around, that's a beautiful thing. Cookies are delicious. I love them too. And that's awesome because you're shooting straight with yourself. On the other hand, if you're like, oh no, Marcus, but I should be able to resist the cookies. Why am I so weak? You're not weak. Evolution is just strong. So it's not a matter of if you're going to dip into the cookies, it's when. And the sooner you can accept our evolutionary makeup, the sooner you get results. The trouble shows up when, like I mentioned, your actions aren't matching up with your word. And that's when we want to circle back to what our commitment is. And if you're unsure what you're committed to, your actions are already showing you. For example, your body composition right now, today, listening to this podcast in this moment, is a perfect reflection of your eating and movement habits over the course of your lifetime. It's literally 100% lined up because if it was any different, your body would reflect those differences, no matter how big or small. Another way to think about it is that your body is a lagging reflection of what you've been eating and how you've been moving or not moving. You've heard me say it before, the body never lies. And that is such an empowering message because it is foolproof feedback for you. So circling back to discipline, it hangs out at the top. Underneath it, we've got consistency. Under consistency, we have commitment. And in order to keep a commitment, all we've got to do is be true to our word, aka do what we say that we're going to do, which we bring to fruition via communication, or essentially language. Now, a really cool thing here is that being your word strengthens it, meaning when you say that you're going to do something and then you do it, your word becomes stronger. However, the opposite is also the case. When you say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, it weakens your word. It starts to mean less and less. And by the way, the people in our lives know this about us. For example, I'm sure that you have friends that when they say that they're going to make something happen or be at some event, in your head, you're like, it's like 50-50 whether that person does that or shows up or not. Whereas you've also likely got friends where if they say that they're going to go somewhere or do something, you know that shit is going to take place because they're solid, they're adults, right? They communicate clearly and they're very upfront and honest about what they can and can't offer. The word or description that we typically use to sum the latter individual up is that they have integrity. And on the other side of the coin, we've got someone who's flaky, or in other words, unreliable. No judgment, it just is what it is. Now, I got an awesome question from one of my clients on this whole discipline topic, and she asked if I could touch on how to set loving boundaries especially with family, friends, and the folks that are closest to us? It's a great question, and in my eyes, the key factor is just communication. For example, if your goal is fat loss and you've got family members or friends applying some pressure in social situations, saying things like, "Oh, come on, a burger won't kill you," or "just have a few more drinks," we've all experienced this, right? It's your job to clearly communicate what you are committed to. So in this case, you could say something like, "I'm really working on my health right now. I'm on a roll, and I would love it if you could support my goal, just because I find that it makes it more difficult for me to stay on track with social pressure and sayings like, 'a single burger won't kill you.' So would you be cool to do that for me? Like, I'd honestly really appreciate it because this is something that's super important to me right now." If someone in your life doesn't resonate or understand that, fuck, man, I don't know if you want that individual in your life. But I'll reiterate, it is your job to communicate your wants and needs clearly. You cannot expect them to read your mind and just know not to offer up things like funky foods and booze that aren't necessarily congruent with your goal. The key to setting loving boundaries is clear communication, and the ball is totally in your court on that, fortunately. Now, it's worth mentioning, if you're uncomfortable with any sort of conflict or potential disapproval, which tons of us are, I know I have been in my life, this clear communication piece is going to be uncomfortable at first. But like anything, the more and more practice that you get, the better and better you'll become. And this is a skill that is so worth investing in because, communication, right? Who couldn't benefit from better communication skills? Personally, I don't know anybody, and I know I have a ton of room for improvement on the communication front. So let's revisit our umbrella breakdown here. Discipline is at the top, then we've got consistency, followed by commitment, your word, and lastly, communication. So in a single sentence, this episode could be summed up to be: discipline is made up of consistently following your commitment to your word and being clear about it. Also, do not worry if you screw this process up. I mess up all the time. The key is doing everything that you can to remedy the situation as soon as possible and get back to your home base or center. Think about it like slipping up nutrition-wise. Oops, I had 4 slices of pizza. What now? How can I make the most of this situation moving forward? Would eating 4 more slices help? No, right? Would getting back on track for my next meal be the best case scenario? Yes. Also, I'd recommend reflecting on why you ate 4 slices of pizza. Is there something that can be done differently for next time that would make skipping those slices more likely? Oh shit, I didn't pack a lunch. I knew my morning meeting was going to go late, and so I hung myself out to dry in regards to nutrition. Amazing. Now we've got clear action steps to take for next time because we established that prepping ahead is super important. Moving forward, we commit to preparing ahead of time. We hold ourselves to that commitment via our word, and voila, we're building discipline. On the other hand, if you continue to put yourself in situations where you're without healthful food and grabbing quick and easy calorie-dense options, circle back to what you are committed to. Because again, the saying, your actions speak louder than words, fits perfectly here because your actions reflect your commitment. Also, a really important distinction to make. Discipline doesn't just apply to things that we view as beneficial. For example, if you get clear with yourself about how eating healthfully isn't a priority because that's just the truth, and you're honest with yourself about that, that is also being disciplined because shoulds and shouldn'ts don't apply here. If someone is a smoker and technically they know that they'd be a healthier individual if they quit, but they're not willing to say that they're going to quit because they know that they're not committed to quitting, that's also discipline. This person is being honest with themselves and everyone else about where they're at. This is a prime example of being your word. It doesn't just apply to behaviors that are more desirable, it applies across the board. So that is discipline broken down and demystified. It's really not this fleeting thing that some people have and other people don't. It's built. And that is amazing news because if you want to build it, this episode gives you a clear and concise step-by-step process to do so. If you're interested in applying for one-on-one nutritional coaching and or workout design with me, you can click the link in the description below or head on over to n1fitness.com/coaching. Follow me up on Instagram at n1fitness and feel free to friend me on Facebook at Marcus Sidhu. Thank you so much to the folks that have taken 30 seconds out of their day to leave a review on their favorite podcast platform. I truly and genuinely appreciate it. And lastly, be sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you found this useful, and I will catch you on the next episode. See ya.